private sector with the help of the government, but unfortunately this government is doing anything but helping those who create jobs and wealth in Canada.
Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Acadie Bathurst. Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to rise to celebrate an extraordinary person and one of my very good friends, Mr. Gilles Cormier. Gilles from Shipygon, my riding, has been awarded the Outstanding Volunteer Award 2016 from HoC Canada. Gilles has been awarded this title for his exceptional work over nearly 30 years in multiple levels of minor and senior hockey. He's best known for coaching Pee-wee and Bantam AAA teams on the Acadian Peninsula, for his involvement in Luc Bourdon Classic, and also for managing the Shipygon for a number of years. Gilles is also a senior level representative for Hockey New Brunswick and an excellent hockey player, as his goal has always been to encourage love of the sport. As was said by the chair of Hockey Canada's Board of Directors, Canadian hockey is healthy and thriving thanks in large part to the work of volunteers like Gilles. Congratulations, Gilles, and I look forward to sharing the blue line with you for many years to come on our Cormier family team. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congratulations again.
St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, the City of St. Albert has spearheaded a project to construct a memorial to honour the late Constable David Wynne, who was killed in the line of duty. The city has committed significant funding, but federal support is needed. Madam Speaker, I first wrote to this government in March about the project. 6 months later, the Minister of Public Safety advised that his officials would be in contact with the mayor to seek additional information about the project. 2 more months have gone by and no phone call has been made. Madam Speaker, Constable Wynne paid the ultimate sacrifice and deserves to be honoured. It's time for the Minister of Public Safety to have his officials pick up the phone, call the Mayor of St. Albert, and make this project a reality.
The honourable member for Egmont.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, earlier this month I spent some time harvesting potatoes at a large farm in my riding, owned and operated by Winston and Harris Callahan of Mimnigash. I was amazed at the technology involved. Today's farmers are employing advanced technologies and farming practices to produce quality food for Canadians. It's farms like these that earn Prince Edward Island's reputation as Canada's food island. When farmers plant their crops, they are undertaking an extraordinary risk on our behalf. They won't see a paycheck until the next year, and it will be subject to unpredictable environmental conditions, crop yield, and market prices. It is essential that we as lawmakers appreciate the experiences and concerns of our farmers in order to create agricultural policy that works for all Canadians.
The honourable député, the honourable for designated Ms. Nibby Churchill.
Madam Speaker, from July 29 to 31st, 2016, the rural municipality and village of Canwood in my riding celebrated its 100th anniversary. The 3-day celebration was a blend of narrations, exhibition of rarely seen photographs, music, multicultural dances, historic and comedic skills. Residents, past and present, from across Saskatchewan gathered to celebrate this once-in-a-lifetime event. I had the pleasure to join the festivities in Canwood as the community inaugurated their centennial monument. Ideas and design for the monument came from local people. The commissioned metal artist for the monument was Doug Reimer from Carrot River, Saskatchewan. Working with Doug was his wife Carmen and his brother Steve and Steve's wife Jenny. Senior President Doris and Hilda gave me a tour of the local museum. Congratulations to all the volunteers and organizing committee on the success of the festivities. Wishing Canwood another 100 strong and many more.
The honourable member for London West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we move towards the end of Women's History Month, I would like to share the good work of a national organization in my riding of London West that is helping to inspire the next generation of female scientists. Let's Talk Science is dedicated to preparing youth for their future careers as citizens in a world that is shaped by science, technology, engineering, and math innovation, or as it is commonly referred to, STEM. The organization has over 2,000 female post-secondary volunteers who are actively making a difference as role models across the country. This week, Let's Talk Science launched Canada 2067, a bold nation-building initiative to shape the next 50 years of STEM learning. By engaging educators, business and government leaders, community groups, parents and youth, they will develop and implement an innovative framework for STEM learning. Let's Talk Science continues to emphasize the importance of girls and women and all people as Canada builds its innovation strategy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, a citizen of my riding, Sébastien Grimard, has won the Lise Hoffman Prize yesterday. He is commander of a Valcartier group, and every day for 18 months, Master Corporal Grimard did work that affected many families on deployment with a great deal of deployment diligence and professionalism. He responded to more than 100 calls for assistance. He intervened in terms of attempted suicide and family violence, and he had a direct positive impact on many members of the military who had problems with thinking about suicide and many other areas as well. Many times our military are facing difficult moments, and we are happy to count on people like Mr. Grimard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today we remember the legacy of a great Canadian whose life was taken away tragically and too soon. Members past and present stand with those celebrating the life of a man who dedicated his life to public service. Jim Prentice will be missed by his colleagues on both sides of the aisle. He served our country dutifully throughout his life, and his devotion to Albertans and to all Canadians will inspire us for many years to come. Jim will be remembered for his generosity and compassion and his willingness to take a stand on some of the toughest challenges of his day. He was a good friend and a principled leader, and his loss will be felt in this House and across the country. On behalf of all members, I offer our deepest condolences to Jim's family and his friends.
The honourable member for Thunder Bay Rainy River.
Madam Speaker, my riding of Thunder Bay Rainy River is heavily represented by tremendously skilled National Hockey League players. Eric, Jordan, Mark Stahl, Carter Hutton, Robert Bertuzzo, and Patrick Sharp all hail from Thunder Bay. And of course, Duncan Keith from Fort Francis, Ontario. These players all have God-given talent, passion, determination, and an unrelenting persistence. But what inspires me most about these athletes is their dedication to our community. Most recently, Matt Murray, goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins, became one of the youngest goalies at the age of 22 to lead his team to the Stanley Cup. When Murray brought the cup to Thunder Bay, he made it a priority to visit the Westfort Rangers minor hockey team and the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Center. His actions show that it is possible to not only be successful, but also remember where you came from and always inspire to help those around you. I'm proud that he's represented our riding so well on the international stage, and I expect that we haven't heard the last of his successes, both on and off the ice. Congratulations, Matt Murray.
The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
There once was a palliative care bill for those who were terminally ill. It determined the plan for Canada and the services it would fulfill. It talked about training for all who provide care for those big and small, the data we need for the research we lead to ensure that we're right on the ball. The elements of palliative care at home, hospice, and everywhere will be standard we boast in this land coast to coast with the specialists needed so rare. The Minister of Health has implied that $3 billion will be applied to home and palliative care so that people will dare to live well long before they have died. So support C-277 today. My PMB's coming your way. In November 3rd week, your approval I'll seek, and together we will save the day. For Canadians want to have choice, to live or to die. Give them voice, and we'll humanely give a good way they can live and end their days full of great joys.
The honourable member for Burlington.
Madam Speaker, Speaker, on October 15th, I had the opportunity to celebrate one young boy's determination in revitalizing an important space in his community. 11-year-old Griffin Gervais was disappointed that his baseball diamond at Lakeshore Public School was in rough shape and not scheduled for an update. Rather than just accepting the fact, Griffin decided he would lead the effort to repair the diamond. Starting last January, Griffin, with the help of his family, classmates, his community, and the City of Burlington's Neighbourhood Community Matching Fund, raised a total of $12,000. Today, with 2 updated benches, new chain link fencing, and a freshly mowed field, the Lakeshore Public School diamond now looks better than ever. Griffin's story is one that is truly inspiring and shows that anyone can make an impact on their community if they set their mind to it. Thank you, Griffin, for all of your hard work, and I was proud to attend the grand opening and to see you throw the first pitch on the field. Thank you.
The honourable member for Fredericton.
I rise to celebrate the life of Wendell Fulton. A well-respected community leader, Wendell passed away peacefully on September 18th at the age of 84 in the same home in which he was born in Lakeville Corner, New Brunswick. An avid international traveler, Wendell maintained strong connections with New Brunswick throughout his life. Politics always remained a passion of his, having been influenced by Louis Robichaud's program of equal opportunity. In the 1973 St. John River flood, Wendell rescued Robichaud's papers from the Liberal Party headquarters basement and arranged for a refrigerated truck to freeze and then dry them out. Wendell's political passions later led him to work closely with several premiers, Liberal caucus members, and to an appointment as the principal secretary to the Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick. Wendell's dedication to community and the advice and counsel he shared with so many will be dearly missed. We extend our thoughts to Pamela, Duncan, Hannah, and his entire family. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, it is great honour to pay tribute to Rick and Donna Wanless of Kamloops and Alan DeGenova, President of Honour House Society. Combined, they have created a unique retreat called Honour Ranch. The facility will be used to help armed forces members and emergency first responders who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Honour Ranch will offer free of charge specialized treatment programs, but also a place to escape from the rigors of everyday life, a place to camp, fish, and a little boating. Through the generosity of the Wanless, who are sharing the majority of their 25-acre hobby farm, much needed help will be offered to those who are suffering from PTSD and other occupational stress injuries that come from being on the front line of helping others. I look forward to the opening of the facility next spring and recognize the important contribution of Mr. and Mrs. Wanless.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil, La Petite Nation. Madam Speaker, last Sunday, I had the pleasure of participating in the Grand Défi Pierre Lavoie, which took place in Montreal and brought together some 5,000 participants. This event is intended to encourage Canadians to adopt healthy daily lifestyles. Since 1999, Pierre has been encouraging people to invest in sports and encouraging young people that it's always possible to overcome challenges with the right attitude and determination. Physical activity contributes not only to physical well-being, but also to mental well-being. It helps to prevent certain illnesses and contributes significantly to combat stress and anxiety. I invite all of my colleagues here in this chamber to participate in such events that promote sports, which is a fundamental factor in health. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Neigette, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's with great enthusiasm that I want to mark the return of the Quebec mission of the Biomarine 2016 Business Congress, which took place in Oslo, Norway. This mission was organized by Technopole Maritime Quebec, situated in Rimouski, with the participation of the Rimouski Economic Development Corporation. I have the privilege of having in my writing institutions and organizations in the area of teaching, science, research, and technologies that make Rimouski the hub of Francophone scientific research that is the most significant in North America in terms of ocean sciences. Even more so, I would like to bring your attention to the next Biomarine Convention, which will take place in Rimouski from the 1st to the 3rd of October 2017. The only sour note here is having a hub, as we do in terms of ocean sciences, that has a disintegrating wharf. The West Pier, which serves as the base for the lighthouse, Ismer, had to be closed last year. And if the government believes in science, research, and development, it must invest in these facilities or infrastructures.
Madam Speaker, Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal. As the world celebrates the festival of Diwali, I would like to wish all Canadians Diwali Mubarak, Diwali ki Shubhkamnaएं. The Festival of Lights is celebrated by different communities, notably by Hindus and Sikhs. The Festival of Diwali brings people together from all walks of life. Sikhs also celebrate Bandi Chhod Divas, the Day of Liberation, which liberates us from prejudice and ill feelings towards others. They celebrate by giving gifts, eating sweets, and watching fireworks. I was pleased to take part in celebration at Vedic Culture Center and Sanatan Mandir Culture Center this past weekend in Markham. I will also be visiting Guru Sikh Sabha Center in Scarborough this Sunday for Bandi Chhod Divas. This occasion also presents us the opportunity to acknowledge the immense contribution made by South Asian Canadians to Canada. I hope the coming year will bring you good health, wealth, and happiness. Happy Diwali. Happy Bandi Chhod Divas. Thank you.
The honourable member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Madam Speaker, this government's policy of engagement is making a significant difference. Last week, the Minister of Foreign Affairs mobilized 70 countries at the UN General Assembly to focus on getting humanitarian aid through to Aleppo. Last night, the Minister led the international community once more in securing a resolution to establish a high-level group that will move forward on a treaty to ban the production of fissile material. This is a critical, tangible step toward our ultimate goal of a world free from nuclear weapons. The resolution, which passed with the overwhelming support of 177 United Nations member states, will restrict production and access to the material necessary to create nuclear weapons. This is universally regarded as the next logical move toward nuclear disarmament. Both nuclear states, such as China and Russia, as well as non-nuclear states, are on board. Madam Speaker, Canada's policy of engagement is welcome, it is needed, and we are producing results. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member for Carleton.
The Prime Minister promised that his deficit spending would be like an amphetamine to stimulate jobs. But yesterday's PBO report on jobs showed that while the economy was cranking out 200,000 net new full-time jobs during the previous Harper government, over the last year, we've lost 6,000 net full-time jobs under the Liberals. When will the government realize that deficit spending is not a stimulant to our economy, it's a sedative?
The Honourable Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to tell the House that not only is the responsibility of government to provide a skilled workforce, it's to work with industry to ensure that we meet their needs. One of the most important things that businesses have told us is that they need a skilled workforce. And that's exactly what the Government of Canada is doing by investing in young people and all Canadians so that they can meet the challenges ahead. We are working hard to build a strong and engaged workforce.
Thank you. Honourable Député de Carleton.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Manufacturing should be booming, but yesterday's PBO report showed that there are 20,000 fewer manufacturing jobs than when the Liberals took office. The low dollar has not been enough to relieve the burden of taxes, electricity costs, red tape, and debt that Ontario and federal Liberals have heaped on our factories. The Liberal solution? Yet more taxes. Does the government realize that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Question from the Honourable Member. Madam Speaker, what we promised the Canadians is to help them throughout their lives. That's what the first thing we did, Madam Speaker, was to reduce taxes for the middle class, to introduce the Canada Child Benefit, to make sure that we would work for our seniors, that we would increase the guaranteed income supplement, that we would increase the CPP, that we made a historic investment in our infrastructure, Madam Speaker, $120 billion over 10 years. And let me just remind the member, this morning the economists say Canada's example to the world, Madam Speaker. Our plan is understood around the world and is applauded. We're going to continue to do just that.
I just want to remind the member that he's not to use props in the House. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Madam Speaker, poverty does not discriminate. Neither does a carbon tax. It doesn't care if you're an impoverished single mom or a senior on a fixed income. As long as you eat, drive, turn on the lights, heat your home, you pay more. A Stats Canada official testified to the Human Resources Committee that, other things being equal, increased food and fuel costs necessarily increase the poverty rate. So will the government support my motion for a formal parliamentary study of the impact of the carbon tax on the poorest Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Oh, sorry, Minister. I've got all of these little boxes here.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know that you take your work very seriously, and I'm happy to see the results of your hard work. I'm also very happy to see my colleague's interest in the question of poverty. I would invite him to read about the effects of the Canada Child Benefit on poverty in Canada, and I would invite him to review his party's policy against this benefit, which led Canada into an unprecedented level of poverty. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's Friday, it's the end of the week, but it hasn't been a good week for the Canadian economy. The member for Carleton talked about the unemployment situation. Now, the Bank of Canada downgraded Canada's economic growth forecast, and the Minister of Finance, we learned from CBC, says that there's an internal finance document saying that changing the CPP will have a negative effect on employment in Canada for 20 years. Now, let's try to end on a good note here. The Parliamentary Budget Officer said that the former government had led a surplus of $2.9 billion. Now, perhaps the government can take inspiration from us. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, at the risk of making my colleague unhappy, the last thing we're going to do is take inspiration from the Conservatives when it comes to the economy. They had 10 years of unprecedentedly low growth, and we gave Canadians a real plan for economic growth. $125 billion invested in infrastructure. It's a historic plan, a plan to make the Canadian economy grow. Not only is our plan accepted by Canadians, it's also accepted by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. Ms. Lagarde recently said, I hope that Canadian policies will go viral. I hope my colleague respects that. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, the reality is that the Liberal plan will once again endanger the Canadian economy with these poor choices. First of all, by imposing the Liberal carbon tax. Then, by increasing contributions to the CPP. This will cost $1,000 more per person for the next 40 years. And they're also keeping business taxes high. When will the government understand that policies that create a heavier tax burden for people are not good for creating jobs? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. And Madam Speaker, I thank my colleague for Louis Saint Laurent, but I'd remind him that the first thing this government did was to reduce taxes for 9 million Canadians. Unfortunately, the Conservatives voted against that measure. This was the first thing we did for Canadians. And Canada's plan has been recognized all across the world. I think that even The Economist this morning said that Canada is an example to the entire world. Our inclusive growth plan, our investments in families, investments in Canadians, and investments in infrastructure are exactly what we need to grow the Canadian economy.
Hey.
Madam Speaker, when it comes to ethics, this Prime Minister promised to do better. But now when the Finance Minister is suspending his cash for access scheme by saying he's just simply following the rules of the Harper government. Well, when Bev Oda tried that same scheme, she gave the money back. So why hasn't he given the money back? No wonder the Ethics Commissioner is calling his behaviour unsavoury. So if the Finance Minister doesn't think what he's doing is illegal, will he tell us whether he thinks it's ethical or is he content to just be unsavoury?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. All members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. Events like these are one part of every party's fundraising and engagement work. Madam Speaker, it's important for us to recognize that when the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can exist, and we continue to follow all the rules.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie.
In their document called for an open and accountable government, the Liberals wrote that there should be no preferential access to government or appearance of preferential access accorded to individuals or organizations because of financial contributions that they may have made. Well, it costs $500 to see the Justice Minister in Toronto, $1,500 to meet the Finance Minister in Halifax, and another $500 to meet him in Toronto. This is painfully clear that the Liberals don't care about their own rules. They talk about restoring trust and integrity. Does that sound familiar?
Our Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, let me explain to the member the best way I can that federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country. All members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules, Madam Speaker. When the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can exist, and Madam Speaker, we will continue to follow the rules.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Well, the good old Liberals will always be the good old Liberals. They continue to believe that their government is above the law. Instead of doing everything in their power to implement the Human Rights Tribunal's decision about discrimination against Aboriginal children, they appointed Ms. Wesley Eskimo, whose first announcement was to make inflammatory remarks to the effect that providing equitable social services to Aboriginal children would be like throwing money out the window. It's insulting. Does the Minister agree with this statement?
Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we as a government have been working very hard and taking very concrete steps to address the ruling of the tribunal as it relates to child welfare on reserve in Canada. We know that we need to overhaul and reform the entire child welfare system. That's what we're committed to do. We are making the steps to make that happen, and we have appointed the right people to do that job. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The Honourable Member for Desnete, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Madam Speaker, yesterday, in response to failing to comply with the legal orders from the tribunal, Liberals announced consultants on First Nations child welfare. Before seeing any documents or findings or talking to child welfare agencies in writings like mine, the Liberal consultant called more money identified by key expert Cindy Blackstock as throwing it up in the air like confetti. This is about delivering for these kids. Does this minister actually believe Cindy Blackstock wants to throw money up in the air like confetti for these kids?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To truly end discrimination, we have to reform the current broken system that we have with child welfare on reserve in Canada. We recognize that as a government, and we're committed to make that happen. But, Madam Chair, we have accepted the rulings of the Tribunal Council. We have moved immediately to invest more than $600 million into child welfare on reserve this year, and we're going to continue to meet that need and meet those demands.
The Honourable Member for Barrie Springwater Oromadonte.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been a year, and the Liberals still don't have a plan to create jobs, but they sure know how to kill them. A carbon tax that will put a $3.8 billion burden on the backs of manufacturing workers. The Prime Minister said that Ontario should transition away from manufacturing. Madam Speaker, what are these people to do when big Liberal government policies kill their jobs?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question. I'm very surprised that the member opposite doesn't understand that the environment and the economy go together, and that by taking action on the environment, that we're actually building a more sustainable future. But maybe he'd like to listen to Preston Manning, who said recently, to be clear, pricing carbon is a good idea. It's needed to drive innovation. And I'm also like to point out that the New Brunswick Committee on Climate Change said that pricing pollution is a solution. So we are about growing the economy and tackling climate change, and we're going to continue moving forward to create good jobs.
The Honourable Member for Barrie Springwater Oromadonte. Oh, sorry. There was a... Oh, sorry. The honourable member for Battleford's Lloydminster. I should put my glasses on.
You have it. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the CETA deal inches to the finish line, driven now by the 9 new demands and disclaimers of Wallonia that virtually make Belgium a CETA-free zone, Canada will be forced to take this deal because we weren't there. Is this the culmination of the progressive clauses the minister was working to insert into an already done deal?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Yeah. Okay. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. Our negotiating strategy has been very effective from the get-go, Madam Speaker. We've been a firm but excellent partner for our Europeans, and our European partners have acknowledged that. As former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney said, Madam Speaker, I think the Prime Minister and Minister of International Trade are doing exactly what we should be doing under the circumstances. The news we have, recent news, is all positive, but we're taking nothing for granted, Madam Speaker. We're going to continue to work until we get this deal done.
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, once again, we see the Prime Minister over-promising and under-delivering. The Prime Minister claimed that his childcare benefit would deliver more to Canadian families, but he hid the fact that the amount will actually shrink from year to year from now until 2021. Now, we know the truth at this point in time, and the fact is that low-income families can actually expect over $100 less per child per year than under the Conservative plan. When will the Liberals stop making things so much more difficult for low-income families in Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Again, I'm delighted for the interests of the other side for poverty. This morning, I'm glad that this gives me the opportunity to signal that the Canadian Child Benefit is going to reduce poverty for Canadian families from 11.2 to 6.7%, take the families of 500,000 Canadians out of poverty, and will, as I mentioned earlier, lead to the largest fall in poverty ever seen in the history of our nation, and to the lowest level of child poverty ever acknowledged, ever observed in our history, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Richmond, Athabasca.
Madame la Présidente, des faits sont des...
Madam Speaker, the facts are the facts. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, job creation is decreasing in Canada compared to the last 5 years. The Liberals' plan is going to cost money to our children and grandchildren. All they want to do is tax, tax, and tax Canadian families, and that approach is simply not working. When will the Finance Minister realize that we are about to hit a wall? Madam Speaker, can the Minister give up his fancy $1,500 cocktail parties and start taking care of job creation and Canada's public finances, please? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, once again, my colleague has given me the opportunity to mention that in the region of Quebec, 200,000 families with children will benefit from an additional $200 per month, which is tax-free. Simply in Quebec, this will help 10,000 families get out of poverty. And because of our tax cut on the middle class, 300,000 taxpayers will see a tax cut there, even though the wealthiest will pay a little bit more. So this is good news for Canada.
Madam Speaker, yesterday Vegreville was blindsided. The Liberals will shut down the Immigration Case Processing Centre. That's the jobs of 280 people gone, 250 spousal jobs impacted, 3 local businesses owned by worker families, a quarter of the students in the town's schools are kids of workers. No consulting, no consideration of costs or spin-off consequences. Will the minister stop this out-of-touch, deliberate attack? It will devastate the people in and around Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, there is a very strong business case to shift this operation from Vegreville to Edmonton. Everybody working in Vegreville will have an opportunity to work at the new location. And there will be a net addition of jobs in Alberta because of this move. Mr. Speaker, it is a responsibility of the government to spend taxpayers' money wisely to improve the efficiency of immigration, reduce processing times, and that is what this move will do.
I just want to remind the members to allow whoever has the floor to speak. I know that it's Friday and you're all excited about asking questions, but your turn will come. The honourable member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, Vegreville can't take another hit. Farmers and energy families are already struggling. The Liberals' planned carbon tax will hurt them even more and hike the costs of everything. Yeah. There are 100 houses on the market in town. This will mean 200 more. A single mom of two who actually moved from Edmonton to Vegreville to raise her kids in rural life can't commute or afford to relocate. Yeah. Will the minister reverse this decision and save her job and all the others?
The honourable minister
Mr. Speaker, members of this House will understand well that there are pressures in immigration, that there are inefficiencies that have to be improved. Therefore, it is incumbent on us to accept a strong business case which will actually result in a net addition of jobs, but will also result in much greater efficiency that will allow us to provide better customer service and to reduce processing times over time. And I point out that all of those currently working in Vegreville will have an opportunity for alternative employment in Edmonton.
Just want to remind the member from Lakeland she had her time to speak. It's time to hear the minister, and I think that we owe that respect to everybody. So the
honourable member for Abitibi Bay James Nunavik AU. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister loves to talk about the nation-to-nation relationship, but we clearly don't have the same definition of that. A true nation-to-nation relationship means respect, but it also means action. Rather than ending discrimination against First Nations children, he prefers to question the figures of experts like Cindy Blackstock. Is this really what we should expect from what the Prime Minister calls his most important relationship, Madam Speaker?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we're very pleased with the work we've been doing with Indigenous people in Canada. Rebuilding and renewing our relationship with Canada's First People is a priority for us as a government. We're also proud of the work that we've been able to do in tackling the real reforms that are necessary to the child welfare system on reserve. We're the first government to really tackle this problem, and it will help rise many Indigenous children in this country out of poverty, and we're going to make sure it happens.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Well, Madam Speaker, rather than comply with the tribunal ruling, the Indigenous Affairs Minister hired a consultant who claims that meeting the $155 million shortfall would be like throwing money around like confetti. You know, it might be confetti to them, but it's life and death to too many children. And speaking of throwing money around, we learned that the minister didn't bother to spend $900 million from her budget. That's money that could have gone to children and to houses and to education. So with all that money unspent, how come they can't find the money to be in compliance with the ruling and just stop fighting Cindy Blackstock and the children? Why can't they put that money where it's needed?
You're here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but I think we have to be very clear, and that is that the tribunal ruling is one that we've accepted as a government, and we are taking concrete actions to implement it. In addition to that, Madam Speaker, the tribunal ruling said that the Government of Canada should invest in the child welfare of Indigenous children based on the need in this country, not based on a number that the New Democratic Party or some other individual wants to put forward. It has to be based on what children need in this country, and that's what we intend to do.
Member for Barrie Innisfil.
Madam Speaker, Apotex is suing the federal government for $500 million. Apotex has been actively lobbying the finance minister, and its chair will host an exclusive Cash for Access event starring the finance minister. But it gets worse. The finance minister sits on the Cabinet Committee on Litigation Management, which reviews lawsuits against the government. Madam Speaker, Canadians aren't naive. They can see that this is a blatant conflict of interest. So the question is, why can't the Liberals?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, if I may, I'd like to repeat for the member something I said indicated earlier, that federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country. All members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. When the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can exist, and we continue, Madam Speaker, to follow the rules.
L'honorable député de Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré.
The honourable member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Madam Speaker, Canadians realize that the government's notion of ethics is quite elastic. We learned that the finance minister, who's part of the cabinet, which studies the government's pursuits, is actually organizing fundraisers with Apotex. This is a company that is already involved with the government. Now, this fundraiser with Apotex does it show a lack of judgment, or is it a real conflict of interest?
Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, these are the same rules that the Stephen Harper Conservative government followed. It's important that we recognize that all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. We have, Madam Speaker, some of the stringent rules in the country. When the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can exist, and we will continue to follow those rules, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie-Innisfil.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister and his cabinet have wide-ranging powers and influence. They have a responsibility to represent all Canadians, not just those who can pay to be heard. The Prime Minister, and this is the important part of this, himself even told his ministers that they should not give or appear to give preferential access. Yesterday, the lobbying commissioner said what the Liberals are doing is worth investigating, and the ethics commissioner said the whole thing is unsavory. Will the Prime Minister and his ministers stop using their privileged position to fill Liberal Party bank accounts?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, again, I'd like to reinforce what I've been attempting to get across to the members, and that is that all members of Parliament and all political parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. Events like these are one part of every party's fundraising and engagement work. Federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country. When the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can in fact exist, Madam Speaker. We continue to follow the rules, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Perth Wellington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And reading the same talking points time and time again doesn't make it any more of an answer either. But cash for access is the name of the game for the Liberal Party, and the finance minister is all in. Excuse me, Madam Speaker. While middle-class Canadians in my riding and across Canada are struggling to make ends meet, drug companies and venture capitalists are whining and dining the Liberal privileged in a downtown Toronto condominium. It's only been a year, but already the Prime Minister and his party are dealing middle-class Canadians out. Would the Prime Minister agree the speed with which his party has stacked the deck is unprecedented, even for Chrétien Gomery standards?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, again I will repeat. Events like these are one part of every party's fundraising and engagement work. Federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country, and the party fully complies with the Elections Act in all cases. When the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can exist, and we will continue to follow the rules, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, these are the same rules that all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by those same exact rules. Thank you, Madam.
The honourable member for Rimouski-Nejet. Yesterday at the Finance Committee, we heard from the Prime Minister's Economic Growth Advisor, Dominic Barton. He readily admitted that the committee's recommendation is to find $40 billion in public money to attract $160 billion in private money. How will the private sector get any return on that investment with tolls, user fees, and other infrastructure costs? When did the Liberals talk about this during the campaign? I must have totally missed that. Now we're hearing about privatization, or possibly.
The honourable member for the honourable Minister for Infrastructure and Communities.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I mentioned early on yesterday, that our goal is to engage with municipalities, with provinces, with territories, as well as to engage with the private sector to deliver more infrastructure, not less infrastructure. We made a historic commitment to invest $120 billion over the next 10 years, and we are living up to that commitment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Central Nova.
Madam Speaker, October is Mi'kmaq Heritage Month in Nova Scotia, where we recognize the history and heritage of the Mi'kmaq people to our region. As I look forward to opening the Pictou Landing Administration Centre next Friday, I recognize as well Dan Christmas, appointee to the Senate, and his long-standing contributions to the community. Given his work in driving economic development in Indigenous communities, je voulais prendre cette chance pour demander.
I want to take this opportunity to ask the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development about efforts being made to stimulate economic growth in our Indigenous communities. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Science and Innovation. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague, the member for Brossard, for his question. And certainly, economic growth is very important for Indigenous communities. Indigenous people have a strong role to play in our economic growth. We have earmarked $30 billion for economic growth projects in economic communities. Pictou Landing is celebrating a project. $600 million has been put into the center there.
Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Asbestos is the #1 cause of occupational death in Canada. Thousands of Canadians are diagnosed with cancer annually due to exposure to the deadly substance. 55 countries have already banned it. Regional councils and mayors support its ban. Countless petitions calling for a ban have been presented in this House. 5 months ago, the Prime Minister pledged to ban asbestos. Every day action is delayed, more lives are lost. This is an urgent matter. When will the Minister of Health implement a complete ban on asbestos?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Safety of Canadians is a top priority of this government. Madam Speaker, on asbestos, the science is clear, and that's why this government will be banning asbestos. Our government has already taken steps towards this goal, including a ban on the use of asbestos in new government construction and a national asbestos inventory. We are currently assessing options, but we can assure this House that our plan will be a whole-of-government approach. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Madam Speaker, thousands of people are losing their jobs in the oil and gas sector. Mariana Hanna, the president of the Canadian Society of Exploration Scientists, has provided me with data showing women are losing their jobs at an even higher rate than men, especially in management positions. What is the minister, why is he abandoning oil and gas jobs, especially for women?
The honourable Minister of Employment, Workforce and Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can assure the member from across the way that we are very concerned about the downsizing and the loss of jobs, particularly for women and Indigenous people, often the last to come into a workplace and usually the first out. The good news is that we have enhanced job banks so that there is better matching for new opportunities for individuals. But overall in Canada at this time, we have 44,000 unemployed scientists in STEM because of the commodities.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Transport should ensure that Canada's transportation system creates long-term jobs and infrastructure. The Pickering Airport has the support of local chambers of commerce, boards of trades, and the highest-ranking locally elected officials that represent over 1.5 million Canadians. Now, the Minister received the Polonsky report on the airport in June. When will he release it? And when will he meet with local representatives so we can move forward and create the 40,000 new jobs that my region needs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for that important question. The Pickering Airport, of course, is a subject that has been around for many years, and the Transport Ministry continues to look at this issue and will come up with a solution as time allows. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Airdrie.
Madam Speaker, every summer Canadians enjoy the outdoors using the many services provided by campgrounds across the country. Unfortunately, yet again, the Liberals are showing a total disregard towards small businesses. They've ended the review of active versus passive business income rules that would have allowed small businesses like campgrounds access to the small business tax rate. Instead, the CRA is handing them huge new tax bills. Wow. The Liberals reversed this poor decision and actually started helping small business owners instead of overtaxing them.
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue.
Madam Speaker, our government is committed to ensuring that all Canadians pay their fair share of taxes. We support small and medium-sized businesses across the country because we know they play a crucial role in our economy. We have not changed the tax rules. The same provisions on the source of income still apply.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Liberal government's war on small businesses doesn't end only with campgrounds. There are many small businesses, small family businesses, mom-and-pop operations who are also being unjustly punished by the Liberals. The Liberals not only broke their campaign promise of a small business tax cut, but also cancelled the review of misapplication of passive income, when the amount of work involved is anything but passive. So, Madam Speaker, where do the Liberals get off deciding that some businesses are too small to be small businesses?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Madam Speaker, CRA examines each case on its own merits. It looks at the eligibility of small business in this regard and will continue to do so. The government has not proposed any changes to the current rules. We continue to work with small businesses to make sure they understand the tax rules that apply to them.
Vancouver East.
Madam Speaker, living care workers are providing an enormously valuable and much-needed service to Canadians. They leave their families behind to come and take care of Canadian families. Madam Speaker, if you're good enough to work here, you're good enough to stay. Next week, the Minister will announce an increase to immigration levels. Will he provide an immediate pathway to permanent residence to living care workers? And in the meantime, will he crack down on the obscenely long backlogs in processing living care workers' family reunification?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, I am very aware of the great contributions made by caregivers, partly because my own mother has benefited from one who has done a wonderful job. I understand the processing times are too long. We have, however, admitted the second highest number in some time of 20 to 22,000 in 2016, and we are making progress in reducing these processing times for caregivers.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. That's cold comfort for living care workers. Just so that Minister knows, for living care workers, the average processing time is 51 months. That's 4.5 years, and this is in addition to fulfilling their 2-year work requirement. In comparison to other economic categories, processing time is only 6 months. How can the minister justify this gross discrepancy in treatment for living care workers, and will he immediately eliminate this obscene backlog?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Speaker, it is in the nature of backlogs that they cannot be eliminated immediately. It does take time. The central promise we made in the election campaign was to radically reduce the processing time for immediate family unification. We are making progress. It does not happen overnight, and we will be announcing substantial reduction in processing time for families, and I am hoping that over the same period we can make substantial progress in the case of caregivers.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
Madam Speaker, the Defence Minister completed a fact-finding mission to Africa, and ministers have been attending peacekeeping conferences. But the Prime Minister had already blindly committed 600 Canadian soldiers to the United Nations, yet still no details for Canadians. As defence critic, the member for Vancouver Quadra said, it is essential Canadians know the specific nature of the mission, specific activities our forces will be engaged in, and the expected duration of the deployment. Will the Defence Minister finally tell Canadians these essential details, or will the Liberals keep hiding behind their curtain of secrecy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Madam Speaker, Canada will increase its support to UN peace operations. The Minister has toured in 5 countries along with former Senator Romeo Dallaire and Justice Arbour. We are going into this with our eyes wide open. The Minister has been on 4 deployments himself. No decisions have been made about specific deployments to countries, and when a decision is made, we hope the decision will be made before the end of the year.
The honourable member from Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, with respect to our mission in Iraq on September 16, 2014, the minister at the time said that we need as much information as possible on what is to come and how things will evolve. Now, we find now we're getting information in bits and pieces after the fact. So when will that change?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
We've been open and upfront with Canadians about the risks involved. We will not share information that puts soldiers in harm's way. I take note that the minister briefed the critics himself personally. He has made himself available to media, and 3 weeks ago the Department of National Defence gave a briefing for everyone.
The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
But, Madam Speaker, when are they going to take the muzzles off the generals? Recently, everyone has seen social media images of Canadian troops at the front lines in the fight against ISIS. We asked the Liberals about Canada's role. Their response? There's been no change in the mission. But that directly contradicts General Dow, who said earlier this month, this mission has changed. It's gone from a more defensive posture to a more offensive one. Defensive to offensive, that's a big, big change. Why are the Liberals misleading Canadians about the role of our troops in the battle for Mosul? When will they lift this cone of silence?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Madam Speaker, the mission is train, assist, and advise. That mission has not changed. And speaking of generals, I just, for the sake of the honourable member, I'll quote U.S. Lieutenant General Townsend, commander of the Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, who recently told the media, "The enemy's listening to this broadcast, so I'm not going to talk about timelines, and I'm not going to go into great detail about what our soldiers do." Madam Speaker, that is the position of our minister as well.
The honourable member for St. Boniface, St. Vital.
Madam Speaker, I was so pleased to hear yesterday that the Prime Minister has recommended 3 notable Manitobans be appointed to the Senator. They will join many other proud Manitobans who are parliamentarians, and we are so happy to have them here. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Democratic Institutions speak to how all Canadians can apply to become senators?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for St. Boniface, St. Vital for his excellent question. Indeed, for the first time, the Senate is open, and there's a merit-based process where Canadians from across the country can apply, and we're seeing the results of that new system. When you take a look at the 9 individuals, the 5 women and 4 men that were nominated, people of extraordinary accomplishment, not only from Manitoba, but from across this country, who've done so much and who I know now are going to contribute incredibly to our parliamentary system and do justice to this place and the other. I look forward to working with them. I look forward to their appointment.
The honourable member for Montmagny, Lille, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Madam Speaker, the Liberals seem to want to centralize power and ignore our regions. Before they came into office, people could expect from the real leadership from regional authorities who knew the regions and the provinces they were responsible for. Can the minister responsible for economic development tell us whether he really knows the economic regions of Quebec, for example, in East Montreal? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and I'm very surprised by the answer this question, because we know that the Conservative government made changes to employment insurance and wanted to move jobs out of the Gaspé and other regions.
Quint.
Madam Speaker, in September, the Ministers of Public Safety and Justice launched an online portion
of the government's consultations about our national security framework. Honourable members have been encouraged to seek the views of their constituents on the subject, and last week the Public Safety Committee travelled the country listening to Canadians. Can the Minister of Public Safety please update the House about the status of these consultations, and can he tell us how the public input will inform the government's approach? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to report that we've received over 9,500 responses from individuals to the online consultation, which remains open until December the 1st, as well as over 9,300 bulk submissions. And all of this is on top of the hundreds of Canadians who have participated in the consultations in person or before the Standing Committee. We've already begun implementing several of the national security commitments that we made at the time of the election, and the advice coming from the public will help us determine what more should be done to keep Canada safe and to safeguard our precious rights and freedoms.
Our member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Holy mackerel. Fishermen in Atlantic Canada were caught off guard by the mackerel fishery closure on October 14th. This closure was unexpected. Neither DFO nor the government warned Atlantic fishermen or explained the reasons for the closure. Atlantic fishermen and coastal communities deserve an explanation. Why was the Atlantic mackerel fishery closed without consultation or warning, and when will it be reopened?
Consult everyone else.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Madam Speaker, we know that some mackerel fishers are concerned. We are working hard to resolve the problems. The department closed this fishery across the Atlantic region to make sure that no mackerel were taken, no more were taken in 2016. There will not be a reopening of the fishery so that we don't go over the quota. We want to make sure to protect the resources we have. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, I sponsored a motion in this House to condemn the illegal use of tax havens by banks and multinational corporations. My motion has full support in Quebec from students, workers, nurses, teachers, public servants, consumers, and the general public. It has been supported by all members of all parties in the Quebec National Assembly. In contrast, every Liberal member here voted against it except one. When will the government start to represent regular Canadians rather than Bay Street and change its shameful decision to vote against my motion? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, the Canada Revenue Agency has expanded its services. We have invested $440 million to help the agency find and penalize those who don't pay their fair share. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, this is terrible. If the government put more radars on the roads but got rid of speed limits at the same time, it would be a problem. It's fine to go after waitresses who don't declare enough tips, but the government is allowing banks to hide billions of dollars, and there's a code of silence. So can the government explain to hard-working, tax-paying Canadians what's going on? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Madam Speaker, middle-class Canadians are rightly concerned that some corporations don't pay their fair share and that some rich people don't pay their share. We have made a historic investment of $440 million so that the tax agency can make sure that people pay their shares and that people have confidence in these measures. Honourable Member for La Pointe-de-Lille. Madam Speaker, yesterday the Newfoundland Finance Minister talked about Canadian values and explaining why the federal government was extending its loan guarantee for the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric project. Can anyone explain to us what those Canadian values are? Is imposing a pipeline on Quebec without its consent a Canadian value? Is using Quebecers' money to finance a project to compete with Hydro-Quebec a Canadian value?
The Honourable Member, Minister of Natural Resources.
Madam Speaker, as I said yesterday, This project will produce renewable clean energy to meet the needs of maritime provinces. And we are continuing to monitor the project, to work with the provinces concerned. We are holding discussions with the Newfoundland and Labrador government. No decision has yet been made. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. I still find it hard to understand. There's nothing for Quebec shipyards, even though there is $100 billion in contract, lower health transfers, and conditions imposed on a Quebec jurisdiction. Are those Canadian values? Anglicizing Quebec, abandoning the forest and dairy industries in Quebec, are those Canadian values? What are these Canadian values that justify the fact that Quebec is helping to fund unfair competition against Hydro-Quebec? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Science and Innovation. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can't comment on discussions that are underway between the federal government and the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, but I can certainly answer the question that is rather far-fetched and that the member has just posed, and that is the idea that we're not playing fair with Quebec. Well, we have the Agency to Promote Economic Development in Quebec regions. We work with Quebec, and we are investing in Quebec to help businesses in the Quebec City region. In fact, the minister was just there to announce assistance to the aerospace industry just a few weeks ago. So our government...
C'est la fin de la période de questions.
This ends question period for today.
Tabling of documents. Oh. The honourable member for Carleton is rising on a point of order.
Yes, Madam Speaker, during question period, I made reference to the labour market assessment 2016 of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. It demonstrates that Canada lost 6,000 jobs last year, that Canada actually lost 20,000 manufacturing jobs despite a low dollar, and that contrary to the 200,000 additional jobs that were being added in the last 5 years of the previous government, that job growth has now come to a grinding halt. I wonder if I could seek the unanimous consent of the House to table this important report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Thank you.
Does the member for Carleton have the unanimous consent of the House? There is no unanimous consent, therefore you cannot table the document.
Documents. The honourable member, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of